Hey, Diana, did you know being a great boss is easy?
Mark, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said.
Ladies and gentlemen, jurists, and just curious, welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast. Here you'll learn about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. Hosted by Mark Whitehead, a seasoned lawyer who remembers when fax machines were cutting edge, and Diana Berry, attorney, COO, and the brains behind the scenes. Together, they are the legal world's most dynamic duo since statutes met regulations. So if you're looking to build a practice, not a prison, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful Barrister, where legal legends are made.
And welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast, a podcast for lawyers about marketing, management, and life skills that probably won't get you disbarred. I'm your host, Mark Whitehead, alongside with my co-host, Diana Berry, my right hand and my COO of my law firm. Hey, Diana, what's going on?
Not much. What's up with you, Mark?
Oh, well, we're just sitting here today pontificating. We always have our little pre-session before we start the podcast, and I like to push your buttons occasionally to get you riled up. I think it actually makes for a better podcast when you're a little bit saucy. So,
do you?
Hopefully, I did a good job of that in the warm up. So.
Well, so on that note, Mark, we're talking about bosses today.
Yes, we are talking about bosses, aren't we?
We are. So, as you are mine, what do you think, Mark? Are you a good boss? Are you a great boss, Mark?
It depends on what point of my career you're going to ask me that question. I would say when I first started out, I would have said that I was a great boss. And then as I got into it, a few years into it, I rapidly learned that I probably was just a really, really, really shitty boss. And therefore, I actually began to be a little bit humble about it and start working on the problem. So I think I'm now on the up curve, like where you kind of have that, was like that J curve where you hit the bottom and then you come back up. So I think I've hit the bottom and I think I've been working my way back up on, I don't know exactly how this J curve spreads out over my past 32 years, but I do think I'm on the upswing, if that's a good answer.
Today we're talking about great bosses,
Right.
Specifically the book How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman and René Boer. Gino Wickman, of course, wrote Traction, which is a book we often reference here. And unlike Traction, though, this one's an easy read. It's I think a quick, small book. Traction can be very dense. This one's about 154 pages, so you can read it in one sitting. So what do you think, though, Mark? What do you think it takes to be a great boss?
A couple of things. Number one, you got to do, quite frankly, you can only be as good as the material you have to work with. So number one, you have to be very good. You have to be very intentional in your hiring process to make sure at least you get great raw talent. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So you got to hire correctly to start with. Okay. So what that means is you need to know in your head what you're looking for. You need to design the jobs as best you can. You need to figure out the qualifications of what you're looking for, and you need to go out and find that person and be patient and wait for the right person to come. Don't hire the first person in the door. Don't hire when you're in desperation. Real easy thing to say. Much harder thing to actually do and execute on. But then once you've found that potential candidate, you have to, number one, set very, very clear expectations. Make sure that person is very clear about what you expect out of them. What is their job? What are their job responsibilities? What authority am I giving them? What authority am I not giving them? What does winning actually look like for that particular employee? They need to know every day, every week, every month, am I winning at the job? We have this concept of keeping a scoreboard and this, keeping a scorecard for our people. That's part of the whole philosophy of, employees do better when they know whether they're winning or losing. So they need to know that. What that means, it's a constant feedback loop. And I've said this many times on this podcast, but business is an infinite game. Being a boss is an infinite game. It's never over. You're never done with any particular employee. You know, it's a constant. Melanie Donaldson, we're dedicating this episode
Oh, she gets a whole
to
episode.
Melanie Donaldson, who is my paralegal, who has been with me as of this coming summer, will be her 30th anniversary. That's the podcast that we ought to do. We ought to have our first guest on, and it should be Melanie, and we can ask Melanie, hey, Melanie, is Mark a great boss or not?
Oh, dear, Mark. I don't think you're ready for that.
Well, let me say this. She better say some nice things about me, because otherwise, then why the hell have you been here for 30 years?
Well, that's a
Think about it.
Yep.
Think about it. Okay, so now you're going back and asking me, am I a great boss? I'm starting to get a little uppity. I've managed to keep a very good, productive employee for 30 years. I must be one hell of a boss. So
Very talented.
there's your answer. Can we stop the podcast now and be done?
All right. And with that,
We'll see y'all next time. Oh, sorry. I've been got to look from our producers. Like, no, you have 30 more minutes to go. Okay, so back to the point. You got to start with raw talent. You got to set clear expectations. You got to let them know if they're winning. And it's a continual, infinite game. It's constant feedback, forever, or until the relationship ends. So with that, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about how to be a great boss from a practical standpoint, not this theoretical stuff that we're talking about. And we'll be right back right after the break.
This podcast is sponsored by Mark Whitehead and Associates, a national disability benefits law firm. Mark Whitehead runs a firm of over 60 dedicated people whose mission is to make a difference in the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Mark represents disabled claimants in Social Security disability, private disability insurance, and veterans disability claims in all 50 states. Mark Whitehead is double board certified in both Social Security disability law and personal injury trial law. Mark has litigated disability cases in over 40 states and counting, and can help your clients too. Stop throwing your phone calls away. Call Mark Whitehead at 701-VIP-LEAD. That's 701-VIP-LEAD. Or visit our website at disabilitydenials.com. Referral fees are paid in all jurisdictions where it is permitted. Refer us your disability cases today and know that your clients will be in good hands.
All right, so one of the concepts that I kind of wanted to bring out is this concept of, here at MWA, are we a family or not? And people often talk about their employees as their extended family. And there's I understand the rationale. You spend so much time.
sometimes more time.
More time. You probably spend more time with your employees than you do with your actual family.
In any given day, absolutely.
And so it's easy for people to start conflating the two, you know. But the reality is, and I heard this last year, and it struck me when I heard it. But you know, you don't want to adopt your employees, okay? That implies a certain amount of inevitability, a certain amount of permanency in the relationship. The reality is that there is at some point you will part ways with every single employee that you have. Either they will leave, or quite frankly, you will leave. But at some point, the relationship will come to its natural conclusion. So we're not adopting people, but we are bringing them into our community. And that's the way I heard it phrased, and that actually makes a lot of sense to me. We are creating here at Mark Whitehead and Associates a community of people with a shared vision, a shared purpose, shared obligations to our clients. So we have a purpose and a mission, that we're all trying to get behind. And if you can't get behind that mission of helping our clients, then you don't need to be here. But it's not a family, it's a community. And everybody in a community has their place. Everybody has their function. There's the leader of the community, that would be me. There's the person that makes sure stuff gets done, that's you. You have your lawyers who make strategic decisions for clients. You have case managers that communicate with clients. You have all the way down to medical records clerks who get the medical records. Everybody in the community has a job. But I think that's a better way to think about it, and a better way to organize, the structure of your business is think about it in terms of, I'm trying to build a community.
Yep. So Wickman, in one of his, and we're not going to do a book report for you guys, but I do think one of the things that he mentions in, I think it's at chapter 7, he lists 5 management practices that would help you become a great boss. And one of them is practice 3 is, or one of parts of practice 5 is the boss versus the buddy rule. And so he says that, and I quote, it's okay to have a friendly relationship with direct reports, but you must understand the fine line between being in charge and being in the trenches, and don't cross the line. If you do, you'll never be a great manager. And so I think that that's one of the things that you just mentioned about, or that's what you're talking about. They're not family; they're part of your community. And when I recruit and talk to people, and I'm interviewing candidates, they ask, inevitably, everyone wants to know what the culture of our firm is like, and I'm like, well, I use the word family. It's like I say,
I know
it's
we
like
do fall into that trap.
I tell them, I said, you know what? We're like a family, and depending on your version and what your history is with the word family, that's a good thing or a bad thing.
And that's the thing is, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a positive
Not for
description
everybody.
for
Absolutely.
everybody.
You should be careful when you
So
use
we should be, I would like to just phrase it, we are a very close-knit community of workers who have a shared purpose and a shared vision.
And
How
I
about
think
that?
I think that's also can be off-putting to some people because,
Okay,
they
I
don't.
disagree totally with that. I think
Well,
that
'cause
is
some
a
people just-
beautiful, elegant way of saying it.
I think it depends on which generation you're recruiting from, too. I think it's very important for the younger generation to have that close-knit community. And other people are just like, but I really just kind of want to come do my job. And I just want to know that I'm not going to be, so law firms can have a very toxic, social media and movies tend to have this idea of law firms being very toxic and, working overtime and, getting projects, at 5 o'clock on a Friday. That's really what they want. The different generations want to know.
So one of the reasons that I like to think about it as a community is a set of a family. There are times that you have to part ways with members of your staff for whatever reason. Sometimes the job outgrows them. Sometimes the firm outgrows them. Sometimes their circumstances change. Sometimes you just made the wrong hire. And quite frankly, it's you can't fire your family. I suppose you could.
Actually.
But that would be very messy. So you want to make sure you have to keep that level of separation.
Oh, absolutely.
Between you as the boss and your employees. You just have to keep that there, which always leads to the interesting question, about hiring relatives, because I've hired 2, So,
yeah.
Fortunately, that's worked out. No problems there so far. But I always said you should never hire anybody you're afraid to fire.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, we might have to cut that out of the podcast too.
I'm sitting here awkwardly.
She's
so
sitting
moving
here
on.
awkwardly.
So what's the next point that you think our listeners should know about being a great boss, Martin?
Well, understand you're not born with it. It's not natural. There is absolutely, in my opinion, nothing natural about being a great boss. It is a learned art. Nothing in law school teaches you how to do it. Nothing, maybe if you had siblings, maybe you learned a little bit. I didn't have any siblings, but there's nothing I think in life that really teaches you how to be a great boss. Therefore, you have to work at it. You have to think about it. You have to plan about it. You have to accept the fact that you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. I look back at some of the mistakes that I have made, and I've made a few Lulus, and I've had to course correct because of those mistakes. And I do think that is one of the first things that one of the first mistakes I made is I got too friendly with my employees. People that I was directly supervising. Because I initially had that mentality, these people are like family. I used to have employees over to my house all the time. And I still do occasionally, but I kind of am a little bit more, judicious about that. But I think that's the first thing, is you have to learn to be a great boss. This book that you've mentioned, which I will admit I have not fully read, it may be a resource. I like the scorecard books. In other words, the concept of teaching your people what's expected of them through a visual scoreboard on a wall, and then daily they can see if they're winning or losing. I like that concept. I like the continual feedback concept as opposed to a annual review, which I think is almost pointless. You're going to wait a whole year to correct somebody. that's idiotic to me. So these are sort of the points that I think, when you start becoming a boss, that you need to start thinking about. How are you going to structure that relationship? But how am I going to learn, and how am I going to get better over time?
Yep. So I think you hit on a key topic that Wickman actually starts the book out with in chapter 2, titled "Do You Have What It Takes?" And he brings out his tool that he suggests is the GWC, which we actually are doing our people analyzers now. And so this is very, this one, but
please explain the GWC to me, because I have a hard time wrapping my head around these questions.
Yep. So the GWC that Wickman calls it is the get it, the want it, and the capacity to do it. And so, what he says is that great bosses are in the respect of those that they lead, and they just don't take that for granted. And so in order to be up to the challenge to be a great boss, you have to have the GWC. And so he breaks it down again. So G is get it. Do you have a deeper understanding and appreciation of each employee as an individual? Do you want it? Do you actually have that, what he calls the fire in your belly to lead? And for capacity, which is the one I think that we both struggle with when we're doing this portion of our people analyzer, he actually breaks it down into 4 types of emotional capacity. And those four types of capacity, one of those of which is emotional capacity, intellectual capacity, physical capacity, and then fourthly, time capacity. And I think that one's the hardest one, is the time capacity, because it's the self-discipline, he says, to use time effectively and to avoid the tyranny of urgency, which I love.
Okay, so this is a rating system, so we're going to play a game here.
Oh, great. We totally scripted this, guys.
So Diana is going to rate me on the GWC.
Oh, we don't ever do this part.
Yes, we're about to do this part right here.
Yeah.
So as you're going to GWC me as the boss.
Oh, dear. How about we do mine?
No.
We just did mine last Friday.
No. This is what's going to make for good podcast right here. So, all right, first one, give it to me. So
the question is that you would be rating, guys. So if you decide to implement this in your firm, it's called the People Analyzer. Look it up. I'm sure there's a template out there, and the GWC. Just so everyone is clear, when I'm giving you the rating, it is 100%. So meaning it's all the time is yes, and if you are even off a little bit, then you have to say no. So the question on the table is, does Mark get it? Does he have a deeper understanding and appreciation of each employee as an individual? I'm gonna have to say no. But I think that that's also the nature of your job. I don't think I think you said yes, then I think that our roles would be reversed. It is my job to know, when the babies are coming, or when someone's struggling, and who's had the hand surgery, and who's got all this stuff. And I bring it to you when it's reached your level, but I don't think that you should know about everybody at this level. We have 75 people.
Okay, so I failed the first question in Diana's opinion.
That's not a fail. I'm just saying.
So let me just say this. I agree with you totally.
Okay, good.
I absolutely.
I still have my job for a third.
Yeah, you have your job until the next question. It could go away at any point. I will say this. It is hard to know everything about everybody in an organization of our size. I don't even try, quite frankly. I think that is beyond my capacity as a leader. Now, I do, if we broke this out and say relative to my direct reports, which I
Oh, that's a good point.
I think
That's
I
fair.
have about 11 or 12 direct reports within this firm, which is still way too many. But at this point, I still have about 11 or 12 people that directly report to me.
I would say yes, you get it.
Okay, so even there, I would say I don't.
Really?
Now, because the requirement's 100%,
Okay.
which I think is a stupid requirement, quite
Oh,
frankly.
that's
I would let's call Gino up and say, Gino, you're in the third edition of the book. We need to change this. This
Yeah.
is wrong.
I do think it is.
I think we need to be grading on a curve.
Yeah.
But yes, I would probably, if I was going to give myself a grade, I would give myself about an 80. I'd call myself a straight up B on this. I think I'm fairly in tune with my people, but not perfectly by any stretch. And quite frankly, what happens is I get distracted, and sometimes I get a little bored, and sometimes I get kind of tired.
There is definitely a bunch of emotional drain.
Yeah, it is draining to try to stay engaged and connected with all of your people. It's hard. And I'm an introvert by nature, you know, and I know so are you. It is hard. It's a little draining. Okay, so Mark flunked the first question. All right, what's the next question?
So the W in the GWC test that Wickman provides is, do you want it? And do you have the fire in your belly to lead? Which I'd say yes.
Okay, so again, I'm going to grade myself on a curve. I would say most of the time, yes, but not 100%, which is his requirement.
Really? I would say that you are always, I don't ever see you following anybody.
I fake it sometimes. I get it. There are days when I just don't want to be here. You know, are there just days that
Yeah, I guess I
just
wouldn't have interpreted that question that way.
Yeah. So I would say for the most part, yes, but I have my moments, you know, when I'm having just a distracted day and I just can't focus. I can't do that. Particularly when it comes to my people. I mean, you've noticed I close my door a lot more than I used to. I used to have more of an open door policy. And some of it is just to shield me from people. Again, being engaged with my people 100% of the time really saps my bandwidth.
Well, I mean, it's an interruption. It can be an interruption, and we've talked about the dangers of interruptions.
I don't mind. You know, what it is?
Productivity.
It's not the interruptions. I don't mind the interruptions. I mind the mental draining of it. If they want to interrupt me and talk something stupid about football, that doesn't really bother me. But if they want to interrupt me and talk to me about their dog dying and I had a bad day, they had a bad day, I'm like, that's a little draining, you know?
Yes, it can be. It can be a lot to be everything to everyone.
Yes.
And so I think the C part of the GWC is the most confusing part, but he does provide that 4-part emotional test for capacity: emotional, intellectual, physical, and time. And Wickman says that to be a great boss, you have to have all 4 of those. And I'm going to go with no on no.
First of all, I'm going to change the question. So it's if anybody knows anything about Star Trek, you know, the Kobayashi Maru, Captain Kirk rigged the test so he could pass it.
Yeah.
I'm going to rig the test so I can pass it. What are the 4 categories again? Remind me. Because one of them I'm going to eliminate.
Okay, definitely rigging the test here, sir.
I'm rigging the test.
Emotional capacity.
Yeah,
Do you have the
dumping
heart,
that one. Totally
the
dumping.
heart to feel what others are feeling.
Yeah, no.
So he says that when you have low emotional capacity, you have superficial connection. You avoid accepting responsibility when things go wrong. Does that hit home there?
Yeah, that's why I'm rigging the test.
Okay. Intellectual capacity is, basically the brains to do the critical thinking and solve complex problems. When you have low intellectual capacity, Wickman says that you lack the ability to visualize an outcome before taking action. And then physical capacity, Wickman says, is the stamina, energy, tenacity, and willingness to get your hands dirty.
I should have rigged that one too. I forgot that one.
Well, when you have low physical capacity, you lack the energy to see tasks to completion, which I would not have put those two together. So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, time capacity, which is the one most lawyers recognize, the self-discipline to use time effectively and to avoid the tyranny of urgency.
Okay, so you said no, I don't meet the criteria. I say I'm rigging the test and changing the criteria and dumping the emotional part of that. I think if I can dump the emotional part and rewrite the test, I'm going to give myself a yes for that one.
Okay.
I think I got it. I'm just changing the terms. I'm just renegotiating the contract here. Okay, Wickman, this was your first offer. I'm renegotiating the damn contract.
So as your right hand, I mean, you literally called me your right hand, right? So this is now non-negotiable. It's in the evidence that I am your right hand. I'm going to argue and say that your time capacity, and actually I have other evidence to add to what you just said in this podcast, because you have complained about your lack of time and your capacity for time in other podcasts. So I don't think you have the time capacity as well. So I will say, so
I hate it when
Wickman
she's
says
right.
that
Damn it, she's right again.
well, Wickman says you can also know that when you don't have the time capacity, when you're quote unquote always in the moment, you're either late for meetings, you're behind schedule, you're overwhelmed, and you're afraid or incapable of letting go. Says the man with 12 direct reports, which our EOS implementer would probably cringe if she heard their podcast. So at any rate,
Just because I wrote it in a book doesn't mean they're right. Okay.
This is fair, sir. So I do think he brings up a lot of things to consider when you want to be a great boss. Whether you, whatever you said the test was, you're going to rig the test and remove emotional capacity. I think that's one of the most important things. I think people genuinely need to believe that you care for them outside of these four walls. If they think you think of them merely as a robot, there's a lot less loyalty. There's a lot less willingness to go above and beyond. And I think especially in the services business, you have to have people that are willing to go above and beyond. And especially in our business because of the high touch clientele that we serve.
So I think that all goes back to you need to, as a leader, as a boss, you need to create the vision for the firm. You need to give your people a purpose for being there other than just collecting a paycheck. Because to be a great boss, you have to inspire people to go above and beyond, what they think would be their normal capacity. So, in our firm, our vision is to build a great disability law firm, and there's a whole lot of elements to that. I'm really glossing over that. Our daily purpose, as I've repeat to my people constantly, is our purpose is to improve the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Very short, very succinct, but that's our purpose. How can you not get behind that if you have any sort of soul?
Yep.
This is very basic. We represent the neediest of the needy, people that any decent person would have great sympathy for. So if you have the privilege of going to work every day to help these people, that is something that should motivate and inspire you and you should be able to get behind. And if you can't, then we made a mistake in hiring you.
I completely agree with you. Obviously, I've been here for 4+ years. I do think, having been kind of more in the trenches with our team, that in a growth firm, as well as serving the clientele that we serve, as we know this, the tendency to get burnt out is a very real thing. So yes. The compassion, the commitment to improve the lives of our injured and disabled clients can be there. As it is our job, mine and yours, to make sure that our team isn't always towing the edge of burnout, whether that's emotional burnout or physical burnout from us moving cheese, as we do in a growth-oriented firm.
Right. And there's no doubt, even though we may have the most noble of purposes, that it can be very grinding and it can lead to burnout. And that's one of the jobs of being a great boss, is to recognize when your people may be approaching burnout. Not everybody is equally up to the job every single day.
That 100% is a hard standard.
100%. Let's say like me, I start Monday just roaring. I'm ready to come out of the gates. Let's get it done. And then by Thursday afternoon, I'm like, oh geez, and if it's like that for me, then I can only imagine it's like that for most of my people in the firm. And a week may not be the right time frame. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, whatever it is. But everybody can sort of reach that point where they're reaching, some level of burnout. And I think that's part of our jobs as being a great boss, is to try to recognize that, try to build in guardrails and safeguards. Quite frankly, that's why it makes financial sense to give your people paid time off, so they can be their best, to give them the, whatever the paid holidays. I can't recite off the top of my head all the paid holidays that we give, but so we know that people need that time off from time to time, just to avoid that burnout, to let people recharge. Just like a good boss, as a leader, I need to take time and recharge. You need to take time. I think you recharged over the Christmas break.
I did.
Came
it
back.
was perfect.
And so you want to make sure your people do that. I mean, some people we have that don't take all their time off like they should. I'm like, take some time off.
For sure. So any closing thoughts, Mark, on what another concept from Wickman's book that you want to share really resonated with you on how to be a great boss?
Well, as I said, I didn't read the whole damn thing. So this is funny. So usually it's I've read the book and Diana hasn't read the book. She's just reading my Cliff Notes. This is a total opposite today. I haven't read the book.
I will say, though, I read the book because it's part of our EOS curriculum. So we are in the 2-year, just to kind of recap, we are in the 2-year implementation of EOS, and this is one of the assigned readings. And so, Mark, you didn't do the assigned reading.
So this book is a fable.
No, it's not.
Is it not a fable?
It's not a Lencioni book.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a fable. Well, that's what's probably put me off from reading it, because I thought it was one of these fable books, which I really cannot stand.
What do you have for one closing thought, Mark, on how to be a great boss? For this segment, just one closing thought for this segment.
I think if you make the right hire, people want to do a good job, but you just really have to make crystal clear what your expectations are. And I think that is where so many people get off track, is they don't really understand, the core function or the priorities of their job, and they get lost in the minutia, and they lose focus of what really they're trying to accomplish. And I think that's part of our job as being a great boss, is to make sure that people stay on track and remember what their priorities are. We did this with our leadership team. Over about 3-4 months ago, we did an exercise, but what are the top 3 most important tasks of your job?
Oh, the boxes?
The boxes, the score boxes, So always remember what the 3 most important things,
categories
are. For example, Kimberly, who manages Social Security, in my opinion, my humble opinion, her most important job is to do what we call check chasing, which is a weird way of saying to make sure that we collect what we're owed.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is to make sure that, quite frankly, all the what we call trigger mail is opened and all the triggers are fired. So when she gets lost in the minutia of doing kind of other things that really aren't as important, and she loses focus, it's kind of our job as be a great boss is kind of bring her back. And remember, these are your focuses. I think that's the most important thing to be a great boss. Just from a pure practical standpoint, is to keep your people focused on what's important.
Yep, everything else is a distraction. I think that's the word I use a lot with you. It's just distraction, whether that's what's going on outside of the 4 walls of the building, or the interpersonal drama that can happen, or, moving cheese too much, which you and I can definitely tend to do, is, okay, well, let's do this. Let's toggle this and see what happens here. And so I think, though, that you wanted to close today's episode talking about Chapter 9 in Wickman's book, The 4 People Issues, where he talks a little bit more about right person, right seat. So,
which I have read that chapter because he basically repeated it verbatim in another book he had. So since he took a shortcut, I took the shortcut and I read the other book. So there. With that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Whitehead, a lawyer, entrepreneur, and business coach. Thanks so much for tuning into the Successful Barrister podcast. We have a blast creating it, and I hope you find it helpful. If our chats have sparked your interest, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at mark@markwhitehead.com. That's Mark spelled with a C. And join the Successful Barrister newsletter. Even better, let's hop on a call. I'd love to chat about how we can collaborate, share ideas, or just catch up. All right, Diana. So we got to wrap this up. And in the wrap up, I think we want to talk about what Gino Wickman calls the 4 people issues. Mm-hmm. which actually I thought he wrote a very good chapter about this in the book Traction. I think he's repeated it here in the book How to Be a Great Boss. But it's the bus analogy. Tell us about that. Lay it on me.
Well, so Wickman says you have to have the right person in the right seat, right? And he gives a bunch of tools in EOS to make sure that you have the right person in the right seat. Part of that is
on the bus.
On the bus.
The company is the bus. The firm is the bus.
And so that's his whole catchphrase is right person in the right seat. You use the people analyzer to make sure that they actually get with your core values and that they have the GWC as well to do their job.
Right. So you want the right person in the right seat.
So his 4 people issues, he says, are you can have 4 situations. One is right person, right seat. The second one is right person, wrong seat. The third is wrong person, right seat. And then the fourth is, of course, wrong person, wrong seat.
Okay. So 1 and 3 sound just alike to me. He just inverted them.
1 and 4?
Maybe 1 and 4.
1 and 4.
All right. So right person, right seat. That's kind of obvious. We got that one. I don't think we need to delve too deep into that.
I do think he brings up a good point. Don't ignore them. No A player ever wants to be. I mean, they do need, attention.
Well, okay. So
make sure that
that is a good point.
That. I do think,
an A player is not necessarily always going to remain an A player if you don't do things to motivate them, to inspire them, to just keep them current, because things change over time.
To invest in them, for sure.
Can you imagine, somebody, let's take Melanie, our 30-year wonder, as an example. She was right seat.
Right person, right seat?
Right, I'm sorry, you're right. Right person, right seat 30 years ago. But that seat has changed over the years. That seat looks nothing like it used to over the years. So, your people have to progress and adapt over time. And I think that's one of her big strengths is she knows more about the Litify system and all of this newfangled stuff that we've installed, all the technology that we've installed, than I would ever hope to know. So she has done a great job of continually adapting, continually learning, and progressing over time. As opposed to, let's take the fictional. This is Steve Riley's story that he always tells. He always tells a story about Marge, which Marge is I think a character in The Simpsons, but he uses her as a fictional, old battle axe of a paralegal who, this is the way I've done it for 30 years and I'm not changing. That type of person. That's how he defines Marge. I don't know how that has anything to do with The Simpsons or not.
Yep, and I think that the danger there is not getting rid of the wrong person in the wrong seat. So clearly just not in the right position to evolve with your firm.
Right.
And I think that that's where a lot of our ADA cousins find themselves, is that they've have this quote unquote Marge in their firm who has been with them for a long time, but who isn't evolving to either the managing partner's growth plans or just with technology, just inability just to keep up with those types of things. And so that person eventually goes from right person, right seat to wrong person for the wrong seat because the seat demands the evolution of technology or what the case may be.
So that's a good question. So what do we do about Marge? Let's say we love Marge. Let's say Marge is our aunt. We can't fire her.
Oh my gosh, I hope you've never hired your aunt.
I never have, but you never know. That is a question that I have struggled with over time, because we have seen people within our firm that were A players to start with, but as things evolved and as situations changed, they kind of they were no longer an A player. And what do you do about that? How do you change their seat? Do you, convince them to retrain and change their ways? Do you figure out ways to gradually invite them to go to some other firm? I don't know. This is I know a lot of lawyers who have this exact problem. I've had conversations with lawyers about this before. And we struggle with it because, quite frankly, we've adopted them.
One of my business philosophies that I don't think I've ever shared with you is that I've actually adapted this right person, right seat. And in my head, it is always, in all due respect to Wickman and Collins and whoever else has written on it, it's not right person, right seat. it's right person, right seat, right time.
Yes, absolutely.
And you must
You
always
should write a
keep it.
book.
Well, I just TM'd it, so let's TM it in the short.
Okay,
show notes, please.
TM the shit out of that.
But I think that you have to keep in mind that it's always the right time. And if you can't meet all those three rights, right person, right seat, right time, that person is just wrong. You have to have the three rights, or else you have to have that wrong person. Because I think the danger then becomes that it just affects the rest of the firm. And in any growth-oriented firm, you can't do that. To echo what you started with at the beginning, you may have adopted them, but we don't adopt. We have a community, and you cannot adopt in a community, sir. So
And what really happens is that person, if they're right person, right seat, but wrong time, they become a choke point. They become
very much so.
They become the ceiling of your firm. Your firm can never progress past a certain ceiling.
Yeah, I've described it to you as an anchor. Someone
Yes.
will literally anchor you to that position in the ocean and you keep wanting to go pull forward as you do with your growth plans, and you will never be able to, because you literally have an anchor in a person who's keeping you from, whether through, inability to adapt to new technology, weak leadership skills, or whatever the case may be. You have a wrong person, and you have the wrong person because they're not at the right seat at the right time.
Right.
So I think he also goes over right person, wrong seat, and the wrong person, right seat, and how you kind of, handle each of those situations. Wickman doesn't say you have to terminate, but inevitably, with the marges, I do feel like sometimes the termination is inevitable, just because you do have to move on, or somebody, or you don't grow, or you will lose A players. Those are, I think, your three contingencies. The rest of the firm will see that they are getting special treatment, and then you will eventually just lose you will not be able to grow because of your turnover that you're constantly having to deal with.
And that's the other problem with Marge. It's not just that Marge becomes a choke point in the ceiling of your firm's capabilities, but Marge will also run off other A players.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants to work with a Marge.
Nobody wants to work with a Marge.
Well, no A players want to work with a Marge.
Yes. So, these are just, I will be honest, this is a tough call, especially when you've had people with you a long time, that
means you can't adopt. You said this at the
I know,
beginning.
and this is, I told you, I'm on a J curve. I'm not at the top of the curve right now. So it's difficult. It's difficult.
Well, we appreciate your vulnerability, Mark.
Yeah. So anyway, as I say, I am a work in progress as a boss. I am not a finished product by any stretch. And quite frankly, I will probably never be a finished product in this infinite game that we are playing.
Well, if I may, you're my favorite boss, so.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. And she had no choice but to say that, because I'm sitting right here in front of her.
He was kicking me under the table.
With that sounds like a great time to cut this nonsense off. With that, thank you for listening to the Successful Barrister podcast, where legal legends are made. I'm Mark.
And I'm Diana.
And together we're the dynamic duo of law. And remember to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And I have so many friends out there that tell me they listen and how much they love our podcast. Well, please do us the favor of giving us a rating. We're really, really, quite frankly, struggling to get people to take that next step to give us that rating. So we would really appreciate it if you would do that. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure to tell your friends. Visit us at successfulbarrister.com, and be sure to visit our sponsor, Mark Whitehead & Associates, a national disability law firm, at disabilitydenials.com. And with that, we're out of here.
Bye.